the blue planet below. The massive observation window of the stellar observer stretched from wall to wall, a crystalline arc that framed the swirling beauty of Earth like a living painting. Captain Blue stood at its center, his forearms folded neatly behind his back, unmoving. His silver eyes reflected the vast oceans and snow-laced clouds of the world below, a world he had watched for 15 long years, and still it left him breathless. Behind him, the quiet hum of alien technology and low conversation was broken by the gentle steps of First Officer Gray. "Captain, you've been standing here for 3 hours," Gray said softly, voice low, respectful. "The daily report is ready." Blue didn't turn. "Tell me, Gray, what do you see when you look at them?" Gray stepped beside his commander, his pale skin shimmering faintly, betraying subtle ripples of curiosity. Like all watchers, Gray's skin responded to emotion, a trait their kind had long learned to control, though Earth had taught them how often those barriers cracked. "I see a primitive species that somehow survived its own violent instincts," Gray replied after a moment. "They still fight wars, they poison their only world. They've barely touched their moon and call it conquest." Captain Blue smiled, a small expression, human-like, and learned from years of watching them. And yet, he said, voice soft, "They paint stories that make our poets weep. They leap into danger to save strangers. They dream of the stars while they're still learning to crawl among them." He turned slowly, locking eyes with Gray. "In all our centuries of exploration, have you ever seen another species like them?" Gray opened his mouth but didn't have a chance to answer. A piercing alarm cut through the calm. Red lights pulsed across the control panels. Officer White stormed onto the command deck, his skin flashing with shades of crimson and orange. Captain White barked. "Solar Monitoring Station Sigma 9 just flagged an anomaly, massive surface instability on the local star. It's accelerating." He waved a hand and a holographic display bloomed between them. Earth's sun, its surface already churning with turbulence and chaos. Flare patterns twisted, unnaturally surging energy, building like a volcano preparing to explode. Captain Blue's silver eyes narrowed as the reading scrolled. His skin rippled deep blue, the color of concern. "How long?" he asked quietly. White hesitated, throat working. 72 hours until full impact. Earth's magnetic field will shield them from direct radiation." But the EMP burst. He looked at the hologram, then back at his captain. "It'll tear their civilization apart." Gray's skin paled visibly. "Their power grids will collapse. No communication, no transport. And it's winter season for half the planet." Silence fell. Captain Blue turned back toward Earth, now sliding into night. The continents glittered like starfields, cities filled with lives, dreams, hopes. Billions. "All of them, blind to what's coming," Blue murmured. Gray glanced down. "The non-interference protocol is clear. We are here to observe, not intervene. Natural disasters must unfold without interference." Blue didn't reply. Instead, he raised a hand. "Pull up Earth Historical Archives," he ordered. "I want to see what happened in a place called New York during the event they named 9/11. Without protest, White triggered the request. The hologram flickered suddenly, replaced by chaos. Fire, ash, screaming civilians. But amidst the carnage, something else, people running toward danger. Firefighters ascending stairwells they knew might collapse. Strangers offering hands to those crushed under steel. First Officer Gray stared silently. His skin flickered amber. Now Blue said, his voice deeper, "Show me the Indonesian tsunami response." The feed shifted, people forming human chains to deliver aid rescue missions from nations halfway across the world. A shared humanity bigger than borders or bloodlines. Captain Blue's tone was quiet but resolute. They don't run, they don't surrender. When disaster comes, they rise. Gray looked at him uneasy. "Captain, what do you suggest?" Blue turned back to the stars. His eyes glimmered. "That we give them a chance. One chance to show us what humans do when the sky turns against them." History speaks in flames and waves. The lights on the Stellar Observer's bridge dimmed as more holographic archives filled the air between the crew. A symphony of humanity's worst moments captured in crystal clarity from the shadows above. Captain Blue moved among the ghostly images. There were screams, smoke, crumbling towers. The chaos of that day, 9/11, never needed translation. First responders vanished into flames, not for glory, but because someone had to. And they ran not from fear, but toward it. Watchers weren't used to this. For all their centuries, they had cataloged peace wars, extinction events, but what stunned them now was the intensity with which humans endured. They suffered, they bled, but they didn't shatter. Rewind 23 seconds, Captain Blue ordered. The footage rolled back. On the screen, a firefighter paused at the base of a burning skyscraper. He looked up at the flames, hesitated, then took a breath, turned to the camera by pure accident, and smiled. That Blue whispered is what I've never seen on any other world. Gray didn't speak. Next came the tsunami. Waves crashing into coastlines. Screams from villages swallowed whole. Families torn apart in an instant. But then came the aftermath, aid ships arriving from thousands of miles away. People who didn't speak the same language, wading through wreckage together side by side, mud-covered and exhausted. Doctors operating under candlelight. Children holding signs that read, "Thank you," in broken English. Helicopters dropping food to rooftops where strangers waved not for help, but to thank the ones who came. They don't need us to save them, Blues murmured. They need a warning, just that. Then, they'll do the rest. Gray's voice was quiet. Captain, if you do this, you are not just violating the protocol. You're setting a precedent. We've watched civilizations burn and never lifted a finger. Captain Blue's silver eyes locked on Gray. And how many of those civilizations had this? He pointed toward the screens where footage now showed volunteers digging with bare hands, pulling survivors from the rubble after an earthquake in Haiti. Tell me, Gray, if this were our world, if it were our families below, would you still quote protocol? The question hung in the air like a blade. Officer White, watching in silence until now, finally stepped forward. His skin had calmed into a thoughtful gray-green. Sir, if you give the word, I'll ready the communication relay. Captain Blue said nothing for a long moment. He turned back to Earth, still quiet, still unaware of the firestorm building in space. I want our message sent to the central diplomatic hub on Earth. They call it the United Nations. Gray blinked. You're not using their military or science agencies. Blue shook his head. No, I want them all to hear this at once, nations, leaders, people. We don't have time for red tape or borders. If they're going to survive what's coming, they need to act as one. White's skin shimmered with apprehension. They'll panic, or worse, think it's an attack. Then we make them listen, Blue said. Pull historical footage, show them angles of their past they've never seen, proof no one else could have. The ship buzzed as the crew moved to obey. A massive transmission dish rose from the stellar observer's dorsal spine. For the first time in thousands of years, a watcher vessel began broadcasting, not just scanning. A voice calm and universal began transmitting across every major communication channel on Earth. News stations, internet streams, military satellites, all were hijacked by a single feed. Then, darkness. The hologram began. In the United Nations General Assembly, the room froze. Heads turned, phones rang, radios cut to static. And then a figure shimmered into existence above the stage, a tall, silver-skinned being with 4 arms and eyes like burning stars. People of Earth, Captain Blue's voice echoed through every chamber, translated into all known languages. We have watched your world for centuries. Today we break our silence. Chaos exploded. Delegates shouted. Security stormed the floor, weapons raised. Scientists began scrambling through their devices, trying to trace the source. But the hologram stood calm, unmoving. You face a threat beyond any recorded in your history, Blue continued. Your sun will soon release a flare large enough to cripple your planet's infrastructure. You have 70 hours to prepare. A beat. Then a scientist, Dr. Thompson, renowned astrophysicist, leapt to her feet and pulled up live solar data. Her face went pale. It's real, she whispered. Oh my God, it's real. Screens around the room flashed red. Solar observation stations confirmed the readings. Satellites already showed magnetic turbulence spiking at unnatural levels. Now the room went silent, not with disbelief, but with terror. President Ward of the European Union rose slowly. How bad, she asked. Another figure appeared beside Blue Officer White. He spoke with grim clarity. Your global power systems will fail. Communication networks will collapse. In your northern regions, winter will freeze everything without electricity. Tens of millions will die in the first week. Billions, if food and medicine are cut off. The Secretary General leaned forward. Then why are you warning us? Blue's skin flashed brighter. Because we've seen what you do when disaster comes. You rise. He stepped aside. Screens ignited around the UN footage of human crisis, heroism, and healing. The impossible made possible. Unity out of chaos. Sacrifice in the face of annihilation. We can offer data, knowledge, but we will not interfere directly, Blue said. This is your test." A murmur spread through the hall. General Rogers of the United States Space Force stood. "So that's it, you dumped the truth on us and hope we figure it out." Dr. Thompson's voice rang out. "No," she said, eyes blazing. "They're giving us exactly what we need." She turned her tablet for all to see. "This solar data, it's more detailed than anything we've ever seen. With it, we might just build something." President Ward nodded. "Then we don't debate, we act." Commander Smith, watching from the ISA control room, issued a single order. "Mobilize every mind on the planet. We've got 69 hours. Earth listens and responds." In less than 30 minutes, Earth had changed. Across the globe, control centers, government offices, science labs, and military command hubs buzzed like beehives struck by lightning. The broadcast from Captain Blue had left no room for doubt. It was real. It was coming, and it would hit harder than anything humanity had faced in recorded history. At the International Space Agency's main command center in Geneva, the room was chaos turned purpose. Commander Smith stood at the center, flanked by Dr. Thompson and a rapidly growing team of military advisors, engineers, and private sector liaisons. Data poured onto every screen: solar flare projections, orbital velocity models, electromagnetic interference maps. "We're already seeing increased solar activity," Thompson reported. Her voice clipped and urgent. "Satellites are being affected. And if we wait even 24 hours to act, we might lose orbital control systems." Commander Smith nodded grimly. "Then we act now." He raised his voice, addressing the room. "Everyone listen up. The aliens gave us data, not a miracle. It's on us to make this work. We have 68 hours and change. First priority, how do we shield the planet? Engineers barked suggestions. Scientists debated materials. Then Dr. Thompson slammed her hand on the table, eyes blazing. "The Mars prototypes." Everyone turned. "We designed them for localized magnetic shielding on Mars, where atmosphere's thin. They're small but scalable. If we network them in orbit 12 units minimum, we could create an electromagnetic net large enough to deflect the flare's EMP." "Problem?" Commander Smith asked. "They were never meant to scale to planetary level," Thompson said. "And we've never even tested them in Earth's orbit, let alone in less than 3 days." Smith cracked a dry smile. "Sounds like we found our best bad idea." A young technician, Tom, called out from across the room. "Sir, we have 6 operational shuttles across various agencies. 2 more can be rushed back into service with repairs. But even if we use everything we've got, that's still not enough to lift 12 generators." Another voice from the back of the room. "What about the private prototypes?" Heads swiveled. There, standing in the doorway, were 3 figures. Robert Malik, the billionaire founder of Ether Corp, and 2 other CEOs from rival space companies walked in with quiet confidence. He held a sleek tablet, which he raised. "We've got 8 launch-ready vessels, smaller than government shuttles but fast and efficient. We were planning to test them next year, but I think Earth just moved up the deadline." Smith blinked. "Can your pilots handle this kind of mission?" "No," Robert replied. "They haul satellites and VIP tourists, not fly straight into solar hell." "We don't have time to train them," someone muttered. That's when Captain Blue's voice came across the secured line, speaking directly from orbit. "In all our years watching Earth," he said, his tone thoughtful, "we have observed something unique. Your people do not need time to adapt. They become what is needed when the moment demands it." Smith's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying we train them now?" No, Thompson answered for him, already scanning her tablet. "We crash-train them. Strip it all down to only what they need to know, launch, deployment, return. No docking, no orbit transfers, no theory. Just get up, deploy, and pray they get back down," someone whispered. Robert grinned. "Sounds like the craziest startup pitch I've ever heard." Smith turned to a comms officer. "Send the word we're calling for volunteers. Worldwide. Pilots, engineers, climbers, divers, anyone who's survived training in extreme conditions. Tell them we don't have time, we don't have safety nets, but we have one shot to save the world." Within an hour, the world answered. From every continent, volunteers poured in. Military veterans, commercial pilots, deep-sea welders, mountain rescue climbers, even disaster relief workers with no flight experience but nerves of steel. Tom, the young technician, helped log names. I can't believe how many. "Sir, we've got hundreds." Smith stared at the list. His voice dropped. "We'll only be able to take 36 into orbit." In a repurposed aircraft hangar, now converted into an emergency flight training facility, the air crackled with urgency. Simulators had been set up in record time. Instructors barked rapid-fire commands, clock timers blared over loudspeakers. Dr. Thompson ran between training pods, checking screens, and calibrating simulations. Again, she snapped to a group of exhausted pilots. "If you misfire that shield deployer, we lose a city." In one pod, Lisa, a commercial airline captain, wiped sweat from her brow, muttering, "This is harder than flying through a lightning storm with one engine." Next to her, Mark, an offshore oil rig engineer, shook his head. "Nah, this is just welding with no gravity and no second chances." Above the floor behind glass, Captain Blue and First Officer Gray observed. "They're attempting to do in hours what our kind requires years to master." Gray said, his skin pale with doubt. "It's reckless. Impossible." "They've been doing the impossible for centuries," Blue said softly, watching as two volunteers clumsily collided inside a zero-G harness and burst out laughing before resetting. "They just don't know any other way." At that moment, a call rang out from Tom across the training floor. "Commander Smith, sir." Smith jogged over. "What is it?" Tom pointed to a section of the hangar. "They're not just learning, they're teaching each other. See that? The mountain climbers teaching the group how to manage oxygen flow under stress. And that deep sea guy, he found a better way to strap the power cord during deployment. They're building their own systems faster than we are." Captain Blue smiled as he watched. It was messy, loud, imperfect, but it was working. Across Earth, something began to shift. Fear gave way to focus. Doubt melted into discipline. And the world, once fragmented by politics and pride, started to move as one. Not because the aliens had shown them how, but because the aliens had trusted them to figure it out. Volunteers from every corner. The sun had not yet risen, but the aircraft hangar buzzed like a battlefield prep zone. Rows of makeshift simulators hummed under fluorescent lights. Volunteers, men and women of all backgrounds, moved with growing confidence between drills. Oxygen tank checks, rapid deployment drills, zero-G harness exercises. Every second, shaved from hesitation, was another second Earth might have when the flare hit. The countdown clock on the far wall blinked menacingly to 17:04. Lisa, the airline pilot, dropped into her seat, soaked in sweat. Her hands were trembling, not from fear but from adrenaline. Again she muttered, "Deploy, stabilize, rotate, anchor." Her breath steadied. "I'll get it right next time." Beside her, Mark, the offshore rig engineer, was sketching out diagrams on a tablet. "These power cells, they're tricky in vacuum, but I used to rig welding gear in Typhoons. Same concept, just colder and more lethal." Across the floor, Commander Smith moved like a conductor through an orchestra of urgency. He stopped at every group, nodding, erecting, encouraging. He saw Lisa run through a deploy simulation with perfect timing and gave her a rare smile. "That's what I want to see." Tom, the young technician, jogged to him holding a data pad. "Sir, volunteers from 5 more countries just landed, and we've got another 50 people ready for fast-track training." Smith raised a brow. "How are they integrating with our current teams?" Tom pointed to the far side of the hangar, where a cave rescue specialist from Brazil was showing a new volunteer how to navigate tight spaces in emergency gear. A diver from Vietnam demonstrated underwater maneuvering techniques to simulate low-gravity coordination. Language didn't matter. Hand signals, diagrams, gestures, and sheer will were becoming the universal tongue. "They're adapting to each other faster than we can organize," Tom said with wonder. Dr. Thompson entered with a satchel full of updated schematics. "New data from the Watchers," she announced, approaching Smith. "Their latest solar flare models show a tighter impact window, more concentrated but slightly more intense." Smith nodded. "Any change in the deployment plan?" "We'll need more precise alignment," she replied, "but fewer shield malfunctions expected if we hit that angle." She paused, watching a group of volunteers run a practice deployment in perfect sync. "You realize this doesn't make sense, right? This shouldn't work. We're teaching orbital deployment to people who 2 days ago didn't even know what an electromagnetic shield was." Smith followed her gaze. "They don't have time to be perfect, so they're becoming effective." Above them, Captain Blue observed with First Officer Gray. Blue's skin glowed faint gold interest, approval, even awe. "They don't compartmentalize like we do," Blue noted. "No rigid hierarchies. When one lacks, another fills. When one stumbles, another adapts." Gray shook his head. "It's not sustainable. They're improvising everything." "Exactly," Blue replied. "Their chaos breeds innovation. Their desperation focuses them." A group of volunteers surrounded Robert, the space company's CEO turned operations chief, as he explained stripped-down flight procedures for the private crafts. You don't need to understand orbital mechanics, he said, gesturing at a schematic. You only need to fly this crate to the spot match velocity with the Earth and release. That's it. No docking, no recovery burns. Up, deploy, and pray. One volunteer raised a hand. What happens after we deploy? Robert's face hardened. You get back, if you can. If not, your part still matters. There was no hesitation, just a nod and a return focus to training. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Stellar Observer monitored Earth's frantic scramble. Captain Officer White called, I'm tracking industrial shifts globally. Manufacturing has retooled overnight, 3D printers producing components, auto factories building frame mounts. Even civilians are fabricating shield anchors from blueprints we slipped into public networks. Blue's eyes gleamed. They're treating this like a war. Every factory is a barracks. Every worker, a soldier. Mom. Back on the ground, Dr. Thompson made her way to a quiet section of the hangar where James, the lead instructor, was reviewing the latest changes with a group of elite volunteers. He turned as she approached. You're here to tell me we've got less time, aren't you? 30 minutes shaved, she confirmed. Solar velocity increased. We're now looking at under 60 hours. James nodded, then turned to the group. All right, reset timers. New launch windows are tighter. Let's run deployment again. Emergency manual override included. Lisa and Mark joined in, running side by side with other crews. The cadence, once chaotic, was beginning to sync like clockwork. They were no longer just training, they were becoming a unit. Victim. At the edge of the hangar, Commander Smith gathered a core leadership group: Thompson, Robert James, Lisa, Mark, and Tom. This is it, he said. In 30 hours we launch. We get those shield generators into orbit, we deploy them, and we hold. Robert added, I've got ships read across 6 continents. We'll lift in 3 staggered waves. Dr. Thompson nodded. Generator calibrations are ready. Teams are assigned by a compatibility and skill overlap. We lose one, we compensate. Smith looked around the circle. This team, this insane collection of civilians, engineers, and thrill-seekers, may be humanity's last chance. Lisa smirked. You make it sound dramatic. Oh, it is, Smith replied, but it's also true. A moment of silence settled. Then from the PA above, a voice called out. All launch volunteers report to prep stations. Mission Alpha begins in T-minus 28 hours. Above Earth, the Stellar Observer shifted its orbit. First Officer Gray leaned forward. Captain, are we sure they'll be able to pull this off? Blue turned, his voice calm. They've already done what no one else in this galaxy would dare. He stared down at the blue and green world rotating below. They're betting everything they have on each other, learning to fly in a day. The hangar doors open to reveal a fleet of mismatched spacecraft, some sleek and streamlined, others rugged and patched together with last-minute modifications. Government shuttles stood beside experimental prototypes and commercial freighters, all prepped to do one thing: carry volunteers into orbit and deliver the generators that could save Earth. The countdown showed 27:49:02. Inside the hangar, every second was consumed. There was no more theory, no more testing. This was down to the wire, roll the dice, throw everything we have warfare, but the weapons were not bombs or missiles. They were people. James stood in the center of the training floor, barking out final drills. Oxygen check, manual override sequence again. You fail the generator deploy, that's a continent gone dark. Lisa and Mark ran through the simulation again. For the 12th time, she nailed the launch timing. Mark connected the shield generator in 24 seconds flat. They slapped gloves. We're ready, Lisa said, her voice iron. Across the hangar, chaos was starting to look like rhythm. Groups of volunteers formed into task teams, each built around strengths, not resumes. Pilots paired with climbers, welders with engineers, divers with data analysts. Each team took ownership of a single generator. Each knew their objective by heart. They weren't just preparing to go to space. They were preparing to hold the line for all of humanity. In the observation deck above, Captain Blue watched the unfolding miracle with his usual quiet presence. But even he could no longer hide the shifting glow in his skin, flickering tones of wonder and something more dangerous, hope. They shouldn't be able to do this, First Officer Gray muttered, stunned. This level of coordination, this speed of adaptation, it defies everything we know. They're not just adapting, Blue replied. They're reimagining spaceflight to match themselves. Their tools, their instincts, their experience. It's not about becoming like us. It's about making the impossible theirs. Below, a group of deep-sea divers were explaining to private pilots how to stabilize in disorienting spin using techniques they'd learned hundreds of feet underwater. Lisa, in her spare time, had begun coaching volunteers on how to breathe through panic, a trick she'd developed in commercial airline emergencies. Mark had built a custom anchor frame to make shield connection in zero-G more intuitive, borrowing concepts from offshore rigging harnesses. None of it came from manuals. It came from life. At the far edge of the hangar, Robert stood with his team of commercial pilots, pointing at a crude diagram scrawled on a whiteboard. "You don't need to be astronauts," he told them. "You need to be delivery drivers with rocket packs. Get the payload into orbit, get to the target zone, deploy, then get out if you can." A young pilot raised her hand. "What if we overshoot re-entry and can't course correct?" Robert didn't sugarcoat it. "Then you drift. But the shield's up, Earth lives. You'll die heroes." No one walked away. As the day wore on, a rhythm emerged. Fly, deploy, survive. Lisa ran through the full launch to deploy to return drill 7 times. She had every step memorized. So did Mark. When they closed their eyes, they saw the orbital positions. They felt the tug of inertia. They could see the clicks and flashes of the generator as it came online. In another corner, cave rescue specialist Nadia had been showing volunteers how to maintain calm in confined dark spaces using a trick she'd learned in a collapsed mine shaft. People listened like it was gospel. Commander Smith moved from group to group, memorizing names he hoped he wouldn't have to write on a memorial wall. His voice remained steady, but his heart ached with pride. "These aren't astronauts," Dr. Thompson said beside him. "They're firefighters, oil riggers, search and rescue techs. And yet, they're ready." Smith nodded. "Because this isn't a space mission. It's a survival mission." That night, if it could even be called that anymore, the Stellar Observer transmitted one last briefing. Captain Blue's hologram appeared inside the hangar, where all volunteers now gathered shoulder to shoulder. "Brave humans," he began, voice calm, resonant, full of strange reverence. "We have studied your kind for centuries. Today, you have taught us what we never expected to learn." He looked out at the exhausted, dirt-smeared, grease-covered volunteers. "You have refused despair. You have chosen action. You have turned desperation into unity, and unity into purpose." The crowd said nothing. There were no cheers, no applause. Just the hard, silent resolve of people who knew that tomorrow, some of them wouldn't come back. "We will monitor," Blue concluded, "but we will not interfere. This is your moment." The hologram faded. Later, as the hangar lights dimmed, Lisa and Mark sat beside their assigned shuttle. "You sleep?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Nope," Mark said, "but I dreamed while awake, close enough." She smirked. "I always hated pre-flight briefings. Now look at me, ready to spacewalk and weld a planetary shield to save the species." He raised a protein bar like a toast. "Cheers to absurd ambitions." A quiet voice behind them. "Make it count." James, their instructor, approached and knelt in front of their generator. He ran his hand over the panel like it was a living thing. "I don't know how many of us are coming back," he said quietly, "but the flare is coming either way. What you do tomorrow, that's the only story anyone will tell for the next 1,000 years." They nodded. Around them, others were settling into bunks, stretching, whispering last-minute prayers. Above, the stars waited, silent, cold, and unforgiving. But for the first time in history, they were about to witness what happens when ordinary humans fly straight into the fire. Into the void, the blackness of space had never felt closer. At T-14, 12 launch towers around the world erupted in thunder. A fusion of government crafts, corporate prototypes, and retrofitted scrap rockets clawed their way into orbit, pushed by hope, desperation, and the sweat of 100,000 engineers who had no time to test. Lisa sat inside the cockpit of a repurposed research shuttle, her hands wrapped around controls designed for someone else's hands, someone else's mission. But today, this mission belonged to her. Beside her, Mark checked the clamps holding Shield Generator 7 in place. "You okay?" Lisa smirked. "I'm flying a tin can we patched together yesterday, carrying a bomb-sized electromagnetic shield into low Earth orbit, trying to outrun a solar explosion." "So, yeah, great." Mark chuckled, nerves barely hidden behind sarcasm. "Same." They breached the atmosphere. Silence fell. Not the peaceful silence of calm, but the pressure-laced, hollow silence of space. Vast, cold, and utterly indifferent. ISA controlled a Gen 7. Commander Smith's voice cut through their headsets. "Confirm orbital insertion." Lisa flicked switches with surgical focus. "Trajectory holding. Beginning deployment prep." One by one, each ship reported in. 12 teams, 36 volunteers, no backup, no second wave. They weren't astronauts. They were Earth's last firewall. And the clock was ticking faster than expected. Captain Blue's voice followed on an encrypted channel. Update: the flare has increased in velocity. You now have just under 10 hours. Lisa exhaled. Of course we do. Bah. Their suits hissed as seals locked. Eva commenced. Outside space yawned around them, black velvet, cut only by Earth's curve below, and a few blinking lights of distant crafts. Lisa pushed toward the anchor point where the shield would deploy. Mark followed, lugging the generator frame like it was his newborn child. He locked it in place. Lisa began the activation sequence. Power cells locked, syncing now. A soft hum vibrated through the magnetic claws. The core lit up, faint blue flickering. Generator 7, hold up, a crackling voice burst in. Shield 3 isn't responding, core's dead. Another voice. Gen 11's mounting is off by 30 degrees, our bracket's not lining up. Shield 2's not stabilizing, tilting off axis. Chaos, just as they feared. Commander Smith, take a breath, stay focused, solve the problem. But training hadn't covered this. They'd practiced deployment, not disaster control, and space didn't care about simulations. Then Mark's voice cut in, calm and deliberate. Shield 3, check the power cell connectors. If it's like the old subsea rigs I worked on, you need to twist it hard after the first click. Rotate 45 degrees until it locks. Force it. Silence. Then it worked. Shield 3 is live. Lisa blinked. Mark, how did you... Same logic, he said. Underwater rigs fail all the time. You just have to treat space like the ocean, only deadlier. Across comms, other voices chimed in, sharing tips from deep sea work, climbing expeditions, emergency rescue. Someone rerouted power using electrical tricks from old subway control panels. A mountain climber taught tether tension tricks that saved Shield 9's crew from drifting. They weren't surviving because of training. They were surviving because they were human, and humans adapt under fire. Then it happened. Generator 11, this is Tom. We've lost our tether. From his panicked voice, everyone knew he and his partner were drifting. Thrusters down, no way back. Drift speed increasing. We'll pass minimum range in 60 seconds, he said. We're losing Earth lock. Lisa checked her thruster fuel. Not enough for rescue and return, only one. She didn't hesitate. Lisa, what the hell are you doing? Mark's voice cracked. She unlatched her safety line and launched herself into space. I was a rescue swimmer, she said, voice like steel. In another life, water or void, it doesn't matter. Someone's always drowning. She fired her jets, accelerating toward the two silhouettes spinning away from the station. Mark screamed into the mic. You don't have fuel to get back? Then find me a net. On board the Stellar Observer, Captain Blue stood motionless. First Officer Gray watched in horror. She's sacrificing herself. No, Blue said, barely above a whisper. She's trusting them. Lisa reached the drifting pair. Her timing was perfect. She latched onto both with a controlled burst, canceling their spin. But now all three floated in open space. Nowhere to go, no fuel. Silence stretched, then a voice. Sector 7, form a chain, like ocean rescues. Now it was Robert from EtherCorp. It didn't need repeating. From every ship in range, tethers flew. People extended arms loops, clamps. Mark anchored himself to Generator 7 and reached out. One by one, humans formed a living chain across the void. Lisa reached for the last hand and was pulled in. Cheers erupted across all channels. Even Captain Blue's skin blazed a brilliant, unheard-of hue, a watcher's awe-given color. By T-minus 8:45 or 11, generators hummed. One remained, Generator 12. And then the unthinkable. Gen 12's core is dead, Tom reported. Main power fried. Backups cooked too. Commander Smith's voice went flat. Without 12, the net fails. There was no backup. And no time. Then a voice cut in. Calm, familiar. I'm already outside. James, the lead instructor, the first to volunteer, the one who had trained them all. He was already there, suit lit by the angry flare of the approaching storm. I can see the manual switches, but they're outside the shielding. Radiation's already spiking. Our Thompson gasped. That exposure, fatal, I know. Commander Smith's voice cracked. James, don't, he interrupted. If I don't, everything you've built, everything is gone. We don't get a second shot. There was no more arguing. He moved toward the exposed panel. Behind him, Earth turned. In front of him, a solar inferno approached. Tell them, he whispered, tell them we stood. The switch that saved a world. James hovered outside Generator 12 like a ghost drifting through the storm. Below him, Earth spun in fragile silence, unaware that its survival now depended on 3 minutes, one man, and a pair of switches that no one else could reach in time. Radiation warnings screamed across his visor, flashing red. His vitals spiked. The flare's outer edge was already lashing the orbit, invisible but deadly, wrapping the darkness in invisible fire. In mission control, every monitor was locked onto his feed. Everyone had gone still. Commander Smith stared, lips parted, hands clenched. "James, I'm here," came the quiet reply. "Let's do this." He reached the panel. The first manual latch was frozen, welded shut by a solar spark. He didn't flinch. He pulled out a small multi-tool from his belt and jammed it in with a grunt. Metal groaned. Sparks flared. First Officer Gray watched from the stellar observer, his skin ghost white. "Captain," he said, "he's taking in more radiation per second than our ships could handle in an hour." Blue's voice was steady, "And yet he stays." James cracked the first seal. "1 minute," he muttered. "Opening main conduit." The countdown continued. T-minus 07:45:00. His heart rate dropped, blood pressure dipping. Dr. Thompson leaned forward in horror. His nervous system's already beginning to shut down. James laughed softly. "Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly on my bucket list to die orbiting a power box, but here we are." His gloves moved slower now, joints stiff, muscle coordination fraying. "Come on," he growled as the second panel refused to open. "Not now." Then with one last shove, it cracked free. "Power core responding," he whispered. "Secondary systems online." The red dot on the global shield map flickered. Inside, the command center gasps filled the air. "He's doing it," Tom breathed. "He's actually beginning network sync," James muttered. His voice was weak now, slow, barely a whisper. "Tethering frequency, 7.62 megahertz." The red dot pulsed blue. Dr. Thompson stood, eyes wide, hands over her mouth. "Shield 12 is online. It's complete." All 12 nodes glowed on the orbital map. The net was whole. Humanity had a shield. But James, he was fading. "Tell my family," he whispered. "Tell them I—" The line went silent. His vitals flatlined. On the screen, he floated motionless beside the now active generator. Commander Smith lowered his head. "James gave us this shot. Now we don't waste it." At T-minus 06, the solar flare crested the final heliocentric barrier. From space, it looked like a wall of light and fire stretching across the void like a tsunami made of flame. From Earth, the skies began to shimmer, magnetic fields twisting under pressure. Aurora flickered in places it had no right to exist: Cairo, New Delhi, Sao Paulo. Lisa stared out from her cockpit, clutching the edges of her seat. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is the wave." In the Stellar Observer, Captain Blue watched the data feeds. "Brace," he said. "All ships prepare for impact." In Mission Control, Commander Smith's voice echoed. "This is what we trained for. This is what James died for. Hold the line." The first wave hit. 12 generators lit up, pouring electromagnetic force into space. A vast glowing mesh encircled Earth, 12 points of blue, connected by currents of human ingenuity and sacrifice. The entire planet watched as day turned to blinding light. On board, the orbital craft systems began to fail. "Power dropping in Gen 3, one pilot yelled. "Batteries can't keep up. Gen 9's thrusters are failing, we're drifting." Lisa turned to Mark. "We have a choice." He nodded before she finished. "We give our power to the shield." One by one, crews rerouted remaining energy reserves, cutting off life support redundancy, guidance systems, even comms to feed the shields. They didn't ask. They didn't hesitate. Lisa flipped the last switch. "Shields over survival," she whispered. Dr. Thompson's eyes brimmed with tears as she watched readings shift. "They're sacrificing their ships," she said, "to keep the shields alive. They're choosing Earth over themselves." The flare slammed into the net. Light screamed. Shield nodes flared, fluctuating violently. One by one, readings dropped to dangerous levels: 70%, 65%, 58%. Inside her powerless shuttle, Lisa gripped the armrest, floating adrift. "Come on, hold. Please hold." In orbit, the blue barrier flickered, then pulsed. The flare slowed, then weakened. "Integrity at 60%, 55%, Tom called out. "But it's holding. We're absorbing it." Mission Control erupted. Commander Smith's voice cracked. "Don't celebrate yet. Ride it out. Hold the damn line." For 3 agonizing minutes, Earth sat on the edge of annihilation. Then the flare passed. Slowly, the readings stabilized. The magnetic net held. Earth was safe. The comms line burst alive. cheering, crying, screaming, dozens of exhausted voices. On the Stellar Observer, Captain Blue stepped forward and spoke to every ship in orbit. "Brave humans," he said, "you've done the impossible. You've defied extinction. You've defied us." He turned to Officer Gray. "Prepare the tractor beams. We're bringing them home." Gray blinked. "We're intervening." Blue's eyes gleamed. The protocol was written for observers. But today we're students. He opened the comms again. "Let us bring you back." Tractor beams hummed across orbit, collecting powerless ships and unconscious heroes. On Earth, billions erupted in celebration. But in every room, every heart, one name remained sacred: James. His image floating beside Generator 12 became the face of survival, of sacrifice, of what humanity was willing to give to protect their own. He didn't raise a gun, he didn't carry a flag. He flipped a switch and saved a world. Shield of humanity. 1 week after the flare, the skies over Earth were quiet, but never the same again. Above the planet, 12 gleaming generators orbited in perfect harmony, their blue pulses no longer desperate flares of defiance, but steady, dignified beacons of survival. They didn't just protect Earth now. They represented it. Each generator bore a name etched not by metal, but by memory. Generator 12 was renamed the James Beacon, its image frozen in orbit with the silhouette of a man who chose death so others could live, became the most shared image in human history. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. The United Nations General Assembly Hall had never been this full. Not during wartime, not during peace. Heads of state sat shoulder to shoulder with astronauts, engineers, volunteers, and even a few who had worked in anonymity, just days before janitors turned launch technicians, welders turned heroes. And at the center of the hall, a glowing blue portal shimmered. It was not a screen. It was not a transmission. It was a doorway. Captain Blue stepped through, in the flesh. Heads turned, silence rippled like thunder. Forearms at his sides, eyes like distant stars. Blue stood tall in his silver-gray uniform, skin glowing softly in hues of humility and reverence. He bowed his head. "We came to observe," he said, voice translated through dozens of earpieces. "We believed we were advanced, enlightened, that we had nothing left to learn." He looked around the room, not just at leaders, but at Lisa, at Mark, at Tom, and the exhausted, pale faces of volunteers still recovering from orbit. "We were wrong." Gasps echoed as the rear doors of the chamber opened and more watchers entered. Dozens of them. A delegation like no other from a species that had never set foot on another world since establishing their doctrine of non-interference. Today they shattered it. "We do not come to rule," Captain Blue said. "We come to ask to learn, to sit beside you, not above you." President Ward of the European Union stood voice firm. "You mean to join our coalition?" "No," Blue said. Then he smiled. "We asked to join your fellowship as students." The entire hall fell silent. Then applause. First uncertain, then rising, until the building trembled from the roar of a planet finally realizing what it had become worthy. Not because of technology, not because of warships or weapons, but because when the fire came, humanity stood together. Later that night, under a sky still glowing with aurora remnants, Lisa sat with Mark beside a monument newly erected in Geneva, a statue of James carved mid-motion arm, outstretched to flip the final switch. Crowds gathered around in quiet awe. "You think we'll ever go back to normal?" Mark asked. Lisa shook her head. "I don't think we're supposed to." She looked up. Beyond the stars, she knew watchers were already rewriting their histories. Alien empires, once too proud to listen, had begun asking questions. An Earth once seen as a primitive world had become the origin of a new galactic age. Not through conquest, but through character. "You ever regret signing up?" Mark asked. Lisa smiled, eyes moist. "No, I got to be part of the moment we stopped being passengers on this planet and started being its protectors." From orbit, the Stellar Observer remained in Earth's gravitational cradle, not to spy, not to assess, but to witness. First Officer Gray stood beside Captain Blue, who gazed out at the pale blue dot below. "Their technology is still rudimentary," Gray said. "Their politics chaotic, their society fractured." Blue nodded. "And yet, when tested, they became more than the sum of their flaws." "Will others follow their example?" Gray asked. "I don't know," Blue replied. "But I know this: if the galaxy must be reborn, it should begin with them." The captain turned to the console. "Upload the human archive," he ordered. "Let every species see what happens when a planet chooses courage over collapse, and send an invitation to every observer, every council, every empire still watching." He paused. Tell them the age of watching is over. It's time to stand. Like Earth did. As the final pieces of the SHIELD network synchronized into long-term orbit, one last update blinked onto Earth's global network. SHIELD status active, generator status stable, global power, grid integration complete status, Earth protected. A simple footer sat beneath the technical readout, dedicated to James R. Holden, instructor, Father Human. He flipped a switch and changed everything. In every classroom, his story was now taught. In every speech, his name was now honored. But in every quiet conversation, the truth always surfaced. James was one of many. A welder named Mark, a pilot named Lisa, a tech named Tom, a CEO who broke protocol, a scientist who tore up blueprints, a child who sent a prayer into the sky. It wasn't one man who saved Earth. It was us. And so it was that when the galaxy looked to Earth next, not as a curiosity, not as a backwater, they saw something no superweapon could create. A shield powered by human spirit, forged in urgency, tempered by sacrifice, and held aloft not by steel, but by ordinary people who became extraordinary when it mattered most.